Hi, this is A New Nigeria with Wale Oluwade. This is your current affairs program where we critically examine the strategic issues bedeviling Nigeria's developmental aspirations and boldly offer practical suggestions on building the Nigeria of our collective desires. Today's episode promises to be engaging and exciting, so get ready as we begin in earnest. And now, let's get on with it. Today, our topic is the making of a democratic society. Regardless of strident proclamations to the contrary, the democratic experiment in Nigeria has been less than salutary. In 24 years of unbroken civilian rule, the evidence will seem to suggest that it has not delivered or performed even minimally as it ought to. The critical metrics of determining a nation's democratic health and viability are all in the negative. Importantly, with the just concluded cycle of general elections and the attendant gross disillusionment and disappointments in its aftermath, many Nigerians are left wondering if this is the best option or system of government available to us in the given circumstance. Therefore, it has become a matter of urgent national priority to begin a conversation on the reimagining of this democratic process, conduct, and practices. What are the issues to be reviewed? What do we need to correct as we go forward? Who are those responsible for this vital responsibility? These are some of the issues we're examining today. We'll take this short break, and when we return, we'll get right into our conversation. Please stay with us. Welcome back. My guest today is Alhaji Yabaji Sani. He's the chairman of Interparty Advisory Council and also presidential candidate of the Action Democratic Party in the just concluded presidential elections. Good afternoon, Alhaji.
Good afternoon, Wale. How are you?
I'm fine. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Let's get right into our conversation. We just concluded this cycle of general elections. What's your general assessment?
Well, I think it's a milestone.
Okay.
Because democracy is a journey.
Okay.
It's not a destination. So where we are today, I can say it's a milestone. And we have a lot to really interrogate, because it has not delivered on the promise that was made.
In 24 years.
Yes. The expectations were dashed. And like I said, it's a milestone, meaning that we're somewhere.
Yeah.
We're not where we want to be yet. But...
Sorry, Alhaji, before you get there.
Yes.
Let me pause and just ask.
Okay.
You said something now that democracy is a journey and it's the best form of government.
Yes.
And we have democracy here.
Yes.
So I want to ask you, can we truly say Nigeria is a democratic society? The question becomes germane because if you look at our processes, our practices, even right from party primaries, right until the conduct of the elections, are they symptomatic of democratic behaviors?
They are not.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why they are not.
Okay.
They are not because if you look at our own makeup as a nation and as a people, if you like, it does not provide the enabling environment for democracy to take root, as it were. Because we have a lot of dichotomies in the system. And these dichotomies tend to outweigh those dynamics that democracy presupposes. Democracy presupposes that you as an individual will be able to take an independent decision as to who should govern you.
Exactly.
Issues of you being compromised or being in a state where you are not able to exercise that independence. It has
Freedom of
decision-making.
choice.
Exactly. It presupposes, you know, you see, because first of all, you have to be informed
Exactly.
yourself, meaning that you will have the knowledge
Exactly.
that will be able to, for you to make that judgment. Number two, you should be academically also independent. You know, that
So that you're immune from
exactly from these inducements. You know, this criminalizing, because Nigerians are being criminalized when elections are there. They give them pittance, and they made them to commit all sorts of atrocities that could even throw them into jail. Because if you buy or you sell, you can go to jail, I think, for 5 years or so. Added to that is the dichotomies I talk about. Here we are, religion comes into consideration. Is he practicing the same faith with me? Does he speak the same language with me? You know, is he from the same region geographically with me? So these are factors that democracy did not envisage that it will outweigh, you know, those dynamics, those ethos, and those things that make what you call democracy.
Brilliant question. Brilliant response. Alaji, let me chip this in. You know, democracy is purely an ideal. It's an ideal that is rooted in certain principles, timeless principles, separation of powers, checks and balances, independent institutions of state that actually serve as bulwarks, the National Assembly, the judiciary, the media.
Like the rule of law.
The rule of law, absolutely, not the rule of man or not the rule of a clique, the rule of law, you know. And so those are the things that make a democratic society. So I want to ask this question about what roles did you see our institutions play in these last elections? Because, you know, usually we used to say to ourselves that our democracy is maturing. Did it seem to you like our institutions, the judiciary, in fact, I will come back there, but let's talk about the INEC. Let's even start from INEC itself as an institution. In fact, the central institution in the conduct of free, fair, and credible institution of elections. Let's talk about political parties. You represent one of them. Let's talk about the police, who are meant to be, you know, neutral, just, you know, ensure that people play by the rules. How did our institutions fare in this? Did they seem to you like they've matured?
Well, you see, when you look at our situation as a country, where we are today, that's why I said it's a journey, you know, and that's why that gives you hope. Yeah. That where you are today.
But are we really on a journey, Alaji?
Yeah, well, you see, in spite of all these things that we have identified, yes, we can say that we are on the journey. Okay. And believe you me, we are going to get there, you know, sooner than later. Okay. Because the people themselves are becoming more and more aware of the power that they possess. You know, yes, if you look at, you mentioned separation of powers, because when you have the rule of law, it presupposes that you have, in our own case, the three arms of government. Absolutely. The executive, judiciary, legislative, independent of each other, but working harmoniously, collaboratively, isn't it? To deliver, you know, for the nationals. And then you also have a situation where the law is known to you, and you have the right to interrogate the law. You will have a situation where judiciary will be independent and will be fair and speedy delivery of justice. You know, you get that for under in a situation where you have rule of law. We are all equal before the law. That's what it is. You know, but like you rightly said, is that the situation we have in this country? You know, I do not think so, because when you look at how the people that pretend over these institutions, supposedly in independent institutions. For instance, if you take the judiciary, it's supposed to be independent, isn't it? But they are not independent. because the man that appoints the Chief Justice of Federation, is a politician and is interested in the process. The man that appoints the INEC chairman, national commissioners of INEC, even REC, is Mr. President. And he's interested in the outcome of this.
He belongs
He's
to
a player.
political party and he's a politician.
Yes, he's an active participant
Absolutely.
in the exercise itself,
Absolutely.
in the game itself. So you can go on and on. The IG of police that is supposed to guarantee peaceful atmosphere.
Neutrality.
Yes.
Everybody playing by the rules.
He is also appointed by the same one man, that is also actively participating in this, exercise. So now,
let's take this short break. We'll
Yes.
continue from where, just hold that thought.
Okay.
We'll take this short break, and when we return, we'll continue with our conversation with Alhaji Sani. Please stay with us. Welcome back. Alhaji, before we went on that short break, I love how you were trying to make our viewers understand separation of powers. 3 arms of government, co-equal, yet separate,
Exactly.
but they collaborate. But they also serve, not just that they are separate, they serve as checks and balances
Exactly.
on one another. And that brings me to this point. I love you talked briefly about the judiciary, whether they are independent or not, they are not. You said, and I agree with you. But let's even talk about one that is currently playing out now, the National Assembly. In a democracy, in fact, what makes a democratic society is the presence of the National Assembly, the legislature, where laws are made. Now, the legislature has 3 main functions: oversight, lawmaking, and representation, because they come from various constituencies represent their people. Now, so we have this National Assembly. As you and I speak, the debate, on ground now is the emergence of the leadership and the principal officers of the 10th National Assembly. And then you are seeing all kinds of permutation and games. This outgoing 9th Assembly, you and I were witnesses to how it emerged. And the promissory note they gave to the executive arm of government was that anything Mr. President brings, it will go. And they signed off. And then we saw it played out. So if you have a National Assembly that
Rubber stamp.
That is a rubber stamp.
Yeah.
How do you have checks? Please.
Yeah, that's why I said that democracy is a journey. And here, I would like to commend at least the effort of INEC in the area of the National Assembly elections. Because when you compare that with the presidential elections,
it was at least
a different ball game. I think to an extent, INEC delivered
on the National Assembly
elections.
Yeah. Most people will agree with that.
Yes. But when we came to the issue of the governorship and the House of Assembly, I think they dropped the ball again.
Absolutely.
Because beavers were bypassed.
Absolutely.
It was free for all. They do whatever they like.
Yeah.
So, and that what played out in the absurdity. Yes.
Adamawa now.
Yeah, Adamawa, yes, that we saw, which played out and made us to look like a laughing stock
in the world,
in the eyes of the international community. Thank God,
cool heads prevailed eventually.
So, you see, so coming to what you said, I believe that the National Assembly you have today, the one you are having, imagine, to a very large extent, will be different from what you had.
Especially because of the numbers.
Yes, not only the numbers. I wouldn't know how the whole thing will play out
eventually
by the time the judiciary decides on the petitions.
The petitions before
the judiciary. But head or tail, I want to believe that the executive, I'm talking about the head of the executive, is going to be somebody who will understand the dynamics of democracy. I'm talking about somebody who doesn't have this experience of the mechanistic system, obey the last order of somebody like Buhari, who lived all his life in the barracks. You had the Obasanjo also, So, but here you are going to have the crops of the presidential candidates you had, none of them had that
background.
Background. It isn't that it's bad to have military background,
exactly.
but it's just that our situation makes it, a bad experience.
You may have a military background and have a democratic mindset.
Exactly, mindset. So I believe that because we are going to have, in addition to what you said, because the opposition, by and large, are going to have a mixed grill now of people, that not just one party per se. So that brings about the checks and balances that we want.
Let me ask this, Alhaji, because we're running out of time. And you have now a scenario where political actors commit crimes, electoral crimes, and then they say to their opponents, go to court, because they know that in the philosophy of state capture, that has been extended even to the judiciary. How dangerous is that? 30 seconds, Alhaji, because I want to ask you to give us 1 or 2 recommendations.
Okay.
How dangerous is this idea of do recklessness and then say go to court? Are the judiciary themselves on the spot? Are they on trial?
Judiciary is on the spot, but more. What is on the spot more, and people, Nigerians will begin to realize, it is the dummy. The dummy that National Assembly sold to Nigerians in the Electoral Act 2022, which they passed, Mr. President, he signed. Why do I call it dummy? They give Nigerians the impression that this is a law that has taken care of the manual process, that we're not going to do manual process again, in the conduct of the elections. That is the manual. Yes, Nigeria did not understand that it was only
it was optional.
The accreditation now that stops people from voting twice.
Alhaji, we're running out of time. Maybe 1 or 2 minutes. What's your recommendation? Just give us 1 or 2 recommendations going forward. How do we fix this? I don't think we're a democracy for many reasons. You alluded to some of them. If you don't have checks and balances, you can't call a society a democracy. If media organizations if people cannot speak freely in the media, and then you'll be sanctioned the next day with a 5 million or 10 million, that's not a democracy. How do we salvage this democracy, from the hands of desperate political actors? Beginning with political parties. We didn't even have them talk about political parties themselves.
Well, you see, how do we get it right, isn't it? How do we meet the expectation of the rest of the world? Because the rest of the world look up to Nigeria, for leadership, proper leadership. So the only way, I think, is still the issue of technological, innovations that INEC has brought into place. But it's like half-baked kind of thing. It wasn't, it didn't cover in fact, the critical areas,
they left it open.
Yeah, it just took care of one area, and then it left the whole gamut of what now will become your result, how you are declared the winner or something, in the hands of the people everything can happen. So until we do that, and we have time, of course, between now and the next election, the Electoral Act has to be revisited, and then those gaps, which are very inimical to the whole process, are taken out of it. Number 2, Nigerians must own this process. We must own it. Don't stand aloof that no, it's not. It's not their own.
I think that's what most Nigerians have realized now.
Yes, that we must own the system. We must step up to the plate and interrogate the people.
Thank you so much, Alhaji.
Then number 3, like we said, the appointment of the officers of INEC in particular. We have to look at how it can be done.
Very true, Alhaji.
So that
we're totally
we don't end up really. In fact, even the INEC officials themselves, they are victims of circumstances. Believe you me.
Very true.
If you look at the circumstances that brought them,
very true.
So because they are human beings.
Very true. Alhaji, we're totally out of time. I must appreciate you for coming. Thank you so much, Alhaji.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Wale.
And I'll see you another time.
Okay.
And that's the end of the interview segment. We'll take this short break, and when I come back, I'll give my closing statement. Thank you. Welcome back, and here are my closing statements. What makes democracy work, and what makes a democratic society? Now, the Democratic Index can help us as a guide to answer these questions. The Democratic Index is an index compiled by the Economist Intelligence Unit, the research division of the Economics Group, a UK-based private company which publishes the weekly newspaper, The Economist. The Democratic Index produces a weighted average on the answers to 60 questions grouped in the following categories. Number 1, measuring electoral process and pluralism. Civil liberties. 3, the functioning of government. 4, political participations. And 5th, political culture in any society. The index categorizes all the about 167 countries into 4 broad categories, namely, number 1, full democracy. Number 2, flawed democracy. Number 3, hybrid regimes. And number 4, authoritarian governments. Now, the index also gives scores to each of these countries ranging from the lowest, which is 1, to the highest, 10. Now, let's dive straight into each of those categorizations of the countries to examine what makes a democratic society and why others aren't democratic. Number 1, using full democracy. These are nations where civil liberties and fundamental political reforms are not only respected, but also reinforced by a political culture that is conducive, to democratic ideals. These nations have a valid and evident system of governmental checks and balances, an independent judiciary whose decisions are enforced, the governments that function adequately, and a diverse and independent media that is free from any sort of repression and muscling. These nations also have only limited problems in democratic governance. The examples of these nations include Canada, France, the United Kingdom, Germany, the nations of the Scandinavian regions, and then, of course, surprisingly, you have Costa Rica in Latin America, you have Chile, you have South Korea, and you have Japan. Surprisingly, only about 8% of global population live in these countries. The second one we want to check is flawed democracy. These are nations where elections are free and fair, and basic civil liberties are honored, but these countries may have challenges in their democratic culture. I mean, maybe in the functioning of government or in certain areas where elections will not be fully participatory. Examples of some of these nations include, surprisingly, America. Also, Israel is categorized as a flawed democracy. For instance, I mean, the current Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, is trying to, amend the judicial laws because he was, prosecuted recently. Also, a flawed democracy includes South Africa. You have Brazil. Of course, if you remember what former President Jair Bolsonaro did after he lost and his people, moved to the streets and all of that. So you have South Africa, you have Cape Verde, you have Botswana, you have India, you have Morocco. These are flawed democratic societies. 37.3% of global population live in these countries. Then the third category are hybrid regimes. These are nations with regular electoral frauds, preventing it from being free and fair democracies. These nations commonly have governments that apply pressure on political oppositions. The judiciary is non-independent. There is widespread and pervasive corruption in the governance architecture, harassment and pressure placed on media, anemic rule of law, and much more. Now, examples of nations in this category: number 1, expectedly, Nigeria, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Paraguay, Peru, Tunisia, Benin Republic, Ivory Coast, and all of that. You have 17.9% of global population living in these countries. And then the last category are authoritarian regimes. This shouldn't be difficult. You have China, you have North Korea, you have Russia. These are nations where there are zero or no political participation. These are repressive, oppressive societies where there is no civil liberty, there are no guarantees of civil liberties. The rule of law is about the rule of one individual, like Russia, like China, like North Korea, and all of that. Sadly, about 38.9% of global population live in these nations. Now, globally, Nigeria is ranked 105 out of 167 countries in the overall ranking in 2022. Also, it should really not come as a surprise that in the entire African continent, only Mauritius is ranked as a full democracy. Most African nations are either hybrid or authoritarian regimes. The conversation towards the deepening of democratic culture in Nigeria is an ongoing conversation. Now, remember, change requires action, and positive change requires positive action. I believe in a new Nigeria, and it is possible. And those are my closing thoughts. Now, that's the program today. Remember to follow me on my different social media handles. Subscribe to my YouTube channel so you can watch this particular video and the others there at your convenience. Drop your comments also. I'd love to hear from you, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.